So in 2016, I I studied public health and global health. And in 2016, I got an internship with UNICEF, which is one of the UN organizations in Nepal. And on my way, I stopped in Bangladesh because my parents lived there. My parents still live there.
Okay.
The day that I landed, I was seeing this person, like a friend of mine. So we go to a cafe. It's in the diplomatic zone in Dhaka city. 15 minutes into it, the cafe comes under a terrorist attack by ISIS. And they start killing people right away. So we get taken hostage inside that cafe. Remember, we were sitting outside by the patio,
Right.
like in the front yard. We get taken hostage inside, and there's already a family there.
Right.
It's one of the most horrific, saddening things that could happen to anyone. Because one thing is like you die in a situation like that, and you're gone. You don't have to experience it. Another thing is you are
witnessed
alive.
it and you saw everything happen right in front of your face.
Yeah. There's police forces, there's the army and everyone, they're around, but they know there's hostages inside. One of the terrorists come and give me a gun. Do this. And I was like, all right, this is it. This is it. And then he shows that it's empty and gives the gun to me.
Mr. Mac. Aha, you, Mr. Mac. Mr. Mac, Mr. Mac.
What is going on, everybody? We are here in New York City. Stay Tranquilo takes the Big Apple, first official episode from New York City. So shout out to you for being able to do this. We're here with Thamid Khan, aka TK, right? I know you said that everybody mentions you as TK. So one, thank you for hosting us here. This is an awesome setting that we're able to record it at. Weather is amazing. The city is in true form. It's awesome. You know, we got to enjoy it a little bit today, so it's been great. But really, thank you for putting this together, and shout out to Vic also for putting this together. But I'm excited for this conversation. I think it's going to be a great convo, and a lot of people are going to enjoy it. So thank you.
Absolutely, Andre. I mean, welcome to Mikasa. Welcome to New York, everyone. It's just incredible to have you here. Also inaugurating the podcast in New York City.
Crazy.
Just means a lot. Shout out to Vic and all the folks in Miami. You know, we're not that familiar with Miami here in New York, but we love the energy, we love the vibe. So thank you so much, Andre.
Yeah, no, we're super excited. Vic's also been a great friend that I actually haven't really known her for that long either, you know, which is great. But I feel like I've known her forever. And I'm sure it's very similar with you. Vic just has that personality and persona. But really, before we get into your story, because you really do have a truly impactful story, and I'm excited about a lot of the topics that we're going to talk about. Just tell them a little bit about yourself, you know, who you are, how you ended up in New York City, and all that fun stuff.
Absolutely. So my name is Thamid. I'll start with that. I'm from Canada. I'm originally from Bangladesh, like I was born in Bangladesh, but raised between Toronto and Dhaka, which is the capital of Bangladesh, and we'll come back to that later. But I grew up between the two countries. I moved to New York about 4 years ago for grad school. I went to grad school at Columbia. I studied epidemiology. I don't do any of that now. But yeah, so I was Thamid all my life. Then in Toronto, I was THK. Now I'm TK because one day in the office, they decided to call me TK because it's easy to spell in your email.
Usually how it goes down.
Yeah. So now I've been living here for a while. I've built an amazing community here. I think people are very friendly in New York. It's helped me grow my life, grow my career. I think this city embraces people. I'm what they call a transplant, but this feels like home. Shout out to all my homies in Toronto, the Six. I love you. I'll be back there soon.
Yeah.
But I think my upbringing or who I am is a collection of my lived experiences, whether you say Bangladesh, am I a Bangladeshi Canadian or a Canadian Bangladeshi? I don't know. Am I a little bit of a New Yorker? I don't know. I wish I could tell you, but it's that identity we always keep on searching, right?
Of course.
Right? So yeah, it makes me who I am. And I think that's what makes the journey more compelling. And you know, whatever the future holds, 100%. I think it makes it more exciting as well.
Yeah, it's funny because I've lived in Miami my whole life.
Yeah.
I lived, I had a short stint when I went away to college, but reality is like Miami is home, and there is really no other home. And part of me is like I'm almost like I feel like you gotta live other places, I mean, sometimes you're forced out of places, and
right.
then there's that circumstance, but the reality is like I think you said it best. You become who you are based off the places that you've been, right? And even visiting, you almost like take a little bit with you every time you visit a place. So imagine living and embracing that culture. So you've got a taste of a little bit of everything.
Yeah. So how I say it is, Dhaka, Bangladesh it's like one of the biggest cities in Asia. It's one of the most densely populated cities in Asia. And it is one of the most polluted cities in the world. So that, and then you come to New York, right? And it's still a culture shock, which I would never imagine. So when I moved to New York, I said that it was a mix between Dhaka and Toronto.
Interesting.
Yeah, so New York is right in the middle.
Very cool.
Yeah.
You found like a good middle ground to give you a taste of both worlds.
Yeah.
So let's rewind, back to the beginning days, right? When you lived over there. How was life over there?
Yeah.
When you were young, obviously.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different context than it is for now. But tell us a little bit about life over there.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because a lot of the people you meet, I don't know if you are mixed or you're from a different cultural heritage.
Cuban, but like third generation Cuban at this point.
Yeah. So when you are coming, so maybe when you talk to your grandparents or your parents, you hear stories about that. So I am that generation in terms of like the Bangladeshi diaspora. I moved when I was in grade 3 at first. Life there was simpler because when you're growing up, you live a very sheltered life. I have to say I grew up pretty privileged compared to the rest of the country. So I always acknowledge my privileges. I acknowledge the chances of education I had, the exposure I had even when I was young. Life was pretty pleasant, but I guess the situation, it's a developing country, as they say. So in terms of economic opportunities, there's always a lot of issues. Bangladesh is very prone to natural disasters. There's political unrest, which the Cuban homies can really relate to. There is a lot of political unrest. So there's a lot of migration going in and out of the country. Growing up, I never realized that I would be moving to Canada. Maybe a month before, not even a week before I was moving, my dad was like, time to pack up. Let's go. Wow. I was like, where? Toronto. I was like, oh, fantastic. What time of the year is it?
And how old were you at that point?
I was 11.
Okay.
And it's March. So for those of you who don't know, Toronto in March is hellscape. Like it is frozen everywhere and there's no room to breathe. Like, so growing up, that's one thing that I say, which is if you're in a hot country, like even if you think about like Dubai or Saudi Arabia, you go outside, it's hot, but you can survive. If you're out in Canada, in Canadian winter, you can literally die.
Yep.
You can literally die.
So I always say the hot is better than the cold. I don't know how people can make that argument. Like you said, you'll literally die. You'll freeze to death.
You'll freeze to death.
You'll find a way. It'll be hot. You'll sweat, but you'll be okay.
Yeah, they used to tell me like if you stay out for too long, your pinky or your toes, it's gonna freeze and it's gonna fall off. What are you gonna do if your toe falls off? So yes, and it's very real. Like it happens to people. So so moving there in March, I had the biggest culture shock, and of course, like just adapting to a new environment when you're young, it's difficult. The rest of my childhood was really in between Dhaka and Toronto, so Bangladesh and Toronto. it was a lot of back and forth. Like I'd be living a year here, a couple of years there. Very, very mixed upbringing because I was living the immigrant life. When I moved to
Right.
Toronto, I grew up in Scarborough, which is comparable to like Queens here. So it's a very immigrant heavy neighborhood. And then in Dhaka, Bangladesh, as I said, like I had a very sheltered life. I had a pretty privileged life. So that transition between like you having house help or a driver in your house
Right.
to going and doing everything on your own, it was like
big
a
shock.
big contrast, right? But it also made me practical because then I realized that I guess my reality is more of the Canadian reality or what is for the 90% of the people on earth. So it made me more practical in terms of how I think, and I think it helps me make decisions in a way where I can see what it requires you to do versus what you want to do.
Right.
It's not necessarily
True.
about I want this, I'm gonna have it, but it's like what does the situation demand of me?
Of course.
Because you're going through so many changes in life. Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I guess two questions, right?
Yeah.
One, why Toronto?
Yep.
Right? And then two, I really want to get into the story of like why you ended up leaving there.
Right. Right.
So I guess answer the first part so then we can get a little bit into into depth of
Yeah.
what got you out of your home.
Well, if I go into like why Toronto, I think
Mhm.
you have to go into a little bit of like history and
Okay.
economics because Toronto in the 90s up until like I think from the 80s till the 2000s, because the Canadian population is not as big, right? So you need cheap labor, right? And you need skilled labor. So my dad applied for a skilled labor immigration visa, which I think is there in the US as well.
Yep.
But at the time, definitely they were taking a lot of Bangladeshis in that skilled category. So he applied. He was working in marketing and management.
Okay.
So he applied in that category. But once he came, he didn't have a good time like finding a job. And you'll see that if you go into immigrant communities, like even if you go to your like talk to your grandparents or even like your parents,
Right.
a lot of them are or for different diaspora communities, you'll see they have a hard time finding jobs here. So that's one of the reasons why we moved to Canada because it made sense. But if in also retrospect, like kudos to my parents and so much love for them, they
course.
sacrificed
Yeah.
so that we could have a better life.
Mhm.
And so many, immigrants do that because
It's an immigrant story right there.
Right.
You leave a unfortunate situation in your home country, home place, to go create a better life for the future generations, essentially.
Yeah, and better schooling, better food,
Everything, yeah.
security. Yeah. So all of that was the reason why my parents chose Toronto.
Mhm.
So I grew up in Toronto and then did my high school back in Bangladesh.
Oh, so you went back?
I went back. As I said, like I did a lot of back and forth.
Oh, wow.
So
okay.
by the time, so I also had a good part of my teenage years in Bangladesh. So like I also then I saw the life in the streets. I wouldn't say it was
Right.
like I didn't grow up in a hood in Bangladesh, but I saw what it meant to hustle
Yeah.
in an environment that can be way more harsh than here. So I learned that, and then I moved for college again in Toronto in 2012. So yeah, I was lots of back and forth. I was a good kid. I studied health. I wanted to be a doctor. I went to the University of Toronto. Great school, love it. Hate it because it's one of the toughest schools in the world. Not gonna curse. I promise I'm not gonna curse.
You're good. You're good.
But it is so difficult. So I flunked. Like I did
Yeah.
so bad in school. But anyway, I'll come back to school in a bit. But then after finishing school, I moved to New York because I got into grad school at Columbia University, a small school here in New York. I studied epidemiology because that was the shit when COVID was happening. No, but like just in all fairness, I applied to epidemiology before COVID happened.
That is crazy in terms of timing.
Yeah, so when COVID happened, I was like, I'm gonna get a job.
Yeah, like, I'm good.
I'm good, guys. So yeah, so then I studied, that's how I started like my journey in New York. And after I moved here, I realized like, there's a reason why they say New York is what it is. And the number of opportunities that you get left and right is phenomenal. I never knew doors would open for me the way it has. Like I'm doing this here now.
Right.
If you asked me this in 2020 when I was moving,
Absolutely not. Yeah.
not like this, like not in this scale or
Yeah.
not in this frequency, right? So in terms of that, I think New York is one of those places where if you really move and if you have a good intent and if you work hard, it's gonna reward you. However, it comes with the pretext that you're gonna get hustled. The second day I land, I go to a deli and someone hustles me for $15. And this happens 3 days in a row. And I'm like, and I'm from Toronto, right? People in Toronto are tranquilo, right?
Yeah.
People in Toronto
That's what
are
I've
very
heard.
tranquilo
Uh-huh.
and nice. So I go in and I'm like, where am I? So you learn from that as well. I mean, if you're not willing to learn, you're gonna get scammed all your life. But I learned from that a lot. And I think New York has made me a more practical person. And I think like a smarter person, which I guess I wasn't. So I think in terms of that, not just in terms of like professional life, but in my personal life, I had a lot of growth because I moved to the city.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, the city builds character, you know, and I think every major metropolitan area will have its own kind of flavor to it, right? You come to New York, you know, coming from Miami and you go to New York, you definitely see the differences,
Right.
you know, outside of climate and all those things, right? I mean, you're talking about two very large cities, obviously Miami,
Yeah.
newer city when it comes to Miami, right? So there's a lot of history that comes from New York, where Miami's kind of just been in this like straight evolution for really the last 20, you know, you're talking about the last 40 years where it's really evolved, and then hyper evolved in the last 4 years with post COVID, right? So it comes with the territory of living in a big city and just really being around people that are ambitious, right? You go to these smaller towns,
Absolutely.
and you know they live it's a different life. There's a different mindset. There really is a hustle culture that comes with living in a big city. It's quick, it's fast, it's fast paced, and New York to me is on steroids when it comes to that compared to Miami. Because Miami's a big city.
Yeah.
You know, we move pretty fast, but you come here and it's a different experience. Everyone's got head down and they're focused on whatever they got to do, and there's no time for anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with that completely. And I think one thing that you said is like, which really resonated with me, is when you're around ambitious people.
Yeah.
Right? I was.
Oh, that's huge.
Yeah. And it's like, you know, people who you surround with that as well. But even if you take that out, right, you might be an introverted person. I was on the subway, like I think my first year in the city, and I was talking to the person who was at the ticketing booth, right? And I asked them, what you do? And they were like, yeah, I'm doing this job. Then they were like, I'm also a poet on the side. So I'm writing poetry, and I'm gonna release a book very soon. And that's just one example of the kind of people that you're surrounded with. I don't know if it's whether like being in a city like New York where rent is ridiculous.
Of course,
food is expensive, and there's the hustle culture, but everyone has a side gig.
Yeah.
Like everyone you're gonna
in
meet.
Miami, that's evolving like crazy.
Right, yeah.
You're seeing the side gigs of, you know, people are working their 9 to 5 or whatever, you know, their full-time gigs. And then they're doing something on the side, or they're looking to do something on the side.
Right?
They're
Whether
like,
it be crypto,
dude,
even.
it's, you know, they're like, dude, I'm working, and I'm like, I'm still barely getting by. It's like, how do, you know, what else do I have to do to get there? And again, it comes with being in these places. They come at a cost.
It comes at a cost, for sure. Like, I think one of the costs is mental health. And I know we're going to discuss this today, but like, I think mental health is one of those things which larger cities have a bigger problem. Addiction, which is something I study and I work on. And I think that's also something that's rampant in big cities. There are certain kinds of addiction, which if you look at geography of America, like if you go to West Virginia or the Appalachians, like there's a different kind of addiction. But big cities, it's like a very sad and tragic mix of mental health and addiction, which you see here, which when people come here, they're like, oh my God, why is New York subway like that? Why do you see people on the street? It's like, you have to, yes, I get it. Like it's
not ideal,
it's
but
not
I mean,
ideal.
they're human at the end of the day, and something happened along the lines of their life.
A life-changing event,
that created those people.
Yeah.
I mean, and before maybe we get into a little bit of this, but I think people really lack sympathy and compassion. You know? And when you live in these big cities, I think people almost forget that judgment that you just placed on that person is not coming from a place of compassion or sympathy or empathy, you know, any of those things, right? You just kind of see them and you're like, yo, that person's messed up, you know, or this person's got a problem or this and that. And it's like, yeah, maybe they do, but you know nothing about that person. You know, you don't know their story. You don't know what they've dealt with. You don't know the trauma that may have caused it, or an illness that they're you really don't know, you know, because I see those, and I don't want to label them as those people, but
right.
you know, but you see people that you question, like,
Who
how
are
did that
they?
happen?
Yeah.
And there's a level of like they're definitely lonely,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
they're
there's a
definitely lonely.
disconnect there,
Yeah.
right? Because like you mentioned, like family and friends
Right.
and things like that.
Like the
That's
social safety net, they
so
say.
important
Yeah.
in all of this, right? You need those people around you to almost keep you in check and be like, hey, look, you're kind of going the wrong way, right? And because you need that, because if you keep going down the wrong way, God knows where that'll freaking take you, you know?
An interesting observation now that you mentioned that, which I've seen in New York, because of course, you have so many different cultural enclaves or like communities or diasporas, is you'll see that, and it's unfortunate or fortunate as it is that for smaller communities, you'll see less issues of like homelessness or like unhoused people or addiction or crime because of that social support, right? Because in smaller communities, everyone knows each other. So they're like, that like Uncle something's kid is doing this. Let's get him into rehab right now, right?
That's true.
So versus like, loneliness, as you said, like if you don't have that social support, it's so easy to fall into that. And like people slip all the time. It's human nature for you to make mistakes. It's human nature for you to continue to make mistakes, right? But it's also our duty as humans to constantly go and try to reach out and help them, because if you're not doing that as you're going through those processes, whether as a community or as a society, you'll see more and more people beyond that point of return. Right? And that's truly what's so sad about, I guess, also like Western society, because
it is a Western society thing. I mean, you see a huge difference when you compare the two.
Yeah. And I'm not saying like in terms of poverty or economic development, but I think just social structures, right? Because like our whole philosophy is we are isolationists, we're individualists, right? It's me first and then everyone else. So when you have that perspective, helping someone who is remotely related to you is not your first priority.
No, it's true. So while we're kind of in the topic of the mental health component of it, right? You've dealt with PTSD at one point in your life, right? Can you explain what exactly was it that occurred that has
resulted in
that?
Yeah, I think for everyone listening, I'll come to the PTSD after, because it's a little bit of a context that I have to set before that. So I'll try to make it quick. It's a longer story because it can take up the whole podcast. I have a TED talk on it. So if
which I was gonna mention that. If for your story, you do have a TED talk that I listened to it before we recorded this, and I highly recommend that people listen to it because it is a deep and impactful story.
So in 2016, I studied public health and global health. And in 2016, I got an internship with UNICEF, which is one of the UN organizations in Nepal. Nepal is this mountainous, hilly country right beside Bangladesh. All of this is in South Asia, and for context, it's beside India. So we're different countries, smaller different countries with like distinct languages, cultures. Anyway, I was going to an internship to UNICEF, and on my way, I stopped in Bangladesh because my parents lived there. My parents still live there.
Okay.
And the day that I landed, I was seeing this person, like a friend of mine, and like a girl who I was seeing at the time, and I met her and her friend the day I landed. So where are we gonna meet, right? I just landed that morning, so we go to a cafe. It's in the diplomatic zone in Dhaka city. And right as soon as we go in, we get seated on like a patio outside with a nice view, a nice garden. And there's a lot of people eating inside. 15 minutes, I think it was, and this is in the evening. 15 minutes into it, the cafe comes under a terrorist attack by ISIS. Never in my wildest imagination did I ever think that I'd end up in a situation like that, right? So they come in with like loud bangs and like, if you've heard gunshots in front of you, imagine like 10 guns going off, or like 5-6 guns going off at the same time with mass hysteria and panic. It's like a school shooting but with multiple people. So, and they start killing people right away. And their intention was, because that cafe was in a diplomatic area, there were a lot of foreigners who were, dining there. So their intention was to take the lives of foreigners because that somehow proved their cause, or whatever their intention was. So they start, they start taking out people one by one, and they come to us, and then they ask us if we're Muslims. And of course, at that situation, you say, I am Muslim by birth, but at that situation where we said, like, yes, of course we're Muslims, don't kill us. They didn't ask us to recite anything or anything like that, but they don't kill us. But this happens for like 30 minutes or so. He comes back, one of the gunmen comes back, points their gun at us, and it's like, let's go. We're like, please let us go at this time. But he's like, no, come inside. So we get taken hostage inside that cafe. Remember, we were sitting outside by the patio,
Right.
like in the front yard. We get taken hostage inside, and there's already a family there. There's also another gentleman there. So they take us to a table, and there's like 8 of us who are held hostage. And then there's the waiters who are like serving in the restaurant or cafe, who are also in there, but also around us is everyone who was dining there, now not alive. It is, Andre, I can't.
No,
like,
I can't even picture it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
It's one of the most horrific, saddening things that could happen to anyone. Because one thing is like you die in a situation like that and you're gone, you don't have to experience it. Another thing is you are
witnessed
alive.
it and you saw everything happen right
Yeah.
in front of your
Yeah.
face.
Yeah. So the night drags on. We try talking to them. We try pleading and begging to let us go. But they came in with a certain mission of like, just like establishing
Right.
their ideology, whatever, in Bangladesh. And Bangladesh is a Muslim country, but I would say it's definitely more liberal or more moderate
Right.
than a lot of other Muslim countries. So like something like that, or a problem of terrorism, wasn't really a big issue in Bangladesh. There have been things like that,
Of course,
like
yeah.
domestic terrorism happens in America as well, right? And it's a big issue, but like it wasn't as big of an issue. So something like that happens and it shakes the country. By this time, there's police forces, there's the army and everyone, they're around, but they know there's hostages inside.
So you have to be very sensitive.
So
to
you have to be very sensitive. And they don't know how many people are dead or alive inside at this time.
True.
So the night rolls on. At some point in the morning, they make us do chores all night. So now they're like familiar with us, like who's who. The only like I guess able-bodied, aged male is me and this another person who was there with me. So they take us to the roof. This is a 3-floor cafe. They start taking us to the roof. And at this point, I'm like, they're gonna shoot me in the roof. I don't know what's gonna
Yeah,
happen.
no,
right?
at this point, I mean, you're assuming the worst at this point.
You're assuming the
Yeah,
worst, right?
1000%.
And one of the guys, like one of the hostage takers, like one of the terrorists, come and give me a gun. Do this. And I was like, all right, this is it. This is it. And then he shows that it's empty and gives the gun to me. But even at this point, I'm not like, I grew up in Toronto and Dhaka. I'm not used to guns. Like, a lot of
absolutely not. Like,
Americans
just
are.
carrying it in. No, yeah, but even just carrying it in your
Yeah.
hand in that moment, you're
Yeah.
like,
And
what
I'm
the
like-
heck is about to happen?
What the hell, right?
Yeah.
And I think he's gonna make me shoot someone at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So he takes it, gives it to us, and he's like, get into the roof right now. So they open the door and they walk us out. They like make us walk out one after another, me first, then the other guy, and then them. And I always give context to this part of the story because a lot of people don't hear the whole story or they wouldn't go and research. But one of the reasons they did that is because I was 22 back then. I was
Okay.
sort of their age. I have a beard. You have a beard, my man. Like, so like I have a beard, so you can be profiled very easily. So they went and saw that if someone who has a gun has a beard, gets shot by the snipers or not.
Oh, they were baiting you, basically.
They were baiting us. And then when the other person comes out, and then the guy comes out, and they were basically doing, I think, one of two things. One is checking to see, okay, if
What-
anyone's here or not, what the situation is, if there are people surrounding, and I mean, just get an idea of things, right? Because by this time, they're all inside. However, fun stuff happens. We get photographed on the roof, and I'm holding a gun. So at that point, I'm of course not thinking. At that point, I'm like, he's
No,
gonna-
you're not thinking about it at that point. After all this happens, I'm
Yeah.
sure there's a...
There's a repercussion, and
Yeah.
we're gonna come to that in a second. But Anyway, so we talk to them and we still plead with that guy. We're like, just let us go. And he doesn't really say anything. And then we come back downstairs. And at this point, of course, my friends are like so happy seeing me. Like, you're alive,
Yeah,
because
no,
they
you
would not
survived.
expect,
Yeah,
right?
100%.
And this is like a hostage situation. So we come downstairs, and his family's of course very like delighted to see him, like their dad's alive. So we come back to the table, like our hostage table, and then after I think an hour passes, and like by this time like morning rolls in, you hear birds, but also like we were gonna go to PTSD, right? But at this time like it was night and it was dark and there were no lights. But at this point it's the morning, so the unfortunate people who lost their lives, the innocent people who lost their lives, they're now around us. So how do you not have PTSD when you're having to sit down at a table like that and there's like people around you, right? Just all over the floor, everywhere. Then an hour later, because we pleaded with them and everything, by this time they're like, you guys can go. So they let us go one by one.
And the military was still outside?
They were all still outside. So I think they understood that this was a hostage situation, so they didn't shoot at us or anything. So when we got out of the compound, like the whole area, and then we turned right, and then there we saw like all the police forces and everyone.
Right.
And we went to them. The next part is
Does the like after you're back, does the military come in and like try to kill them? And okay.
So after we're back, we're taken aside. We're taken to a safe house around the cafe, and they essentially, the paramilitary, like the troops and the commandos, they go in and they're killed. Right? All 5 of them are killed. However, now, second part of the story starts because we were photographed in the roof. So the first suspicion is from the authorities who took us. So they're like, even without seeing the photos, they're like, you guys were inside, you're that age, boom.
Yeah, they're not too. I mean, they don't know what happened inside, so they're coming in.
They know we're hostages. We're giving our test statements, but they don't want to believe us, right? Even when they have all the evidence and we're giving them literally what happened, when we're telling them what happened, they're not believing
Holy
us.
cow.
So they take us in. One of the how do you say it? Defense intelligence units of Bangladesh at the time. They take us in. They were probably a little more sympathetic towards us because they deal with terrorists all the time, and they see it, they're like, these guys are not terrorists.
Right.
You can profile them, or you can go to someone's Facebook or Instagram and go to their DMs.
You'll be able to know.
Right,
Yeah.
you'll be able to know. You see their search history and you know who's what and who's not.
Of course.
Also, the people who went to attack, the guys who went to attack that day, the terrorists, they put out their own profiles before that because they knew they were going on like this sacred mission, right? So they were famous in their own community by then.
Of course, yeah.
So 2 and 2, like everyone knows. The next day, however, they kept us. They were like basically taking statements from us, but they kept us overnight. The next day, someone leaked that photo in one of the newspapers, and the newspapers published that without any context.
Oh my God. And it was you in the picture?
It was me, the other guy,
And the other guy, yeah.
and one of the terrorists.
Holy cow.
And there is a media shitstorm now. Who are these guys? Where are they? So now the country goes into a different kind of mode. Like the whole public sentiment's now changing. So I'm trapped with this intelligence unit who have now essentially, unofficially kept us. And if you don't know something about underdeveloped countries or countries with like, governments who rule with an iron fist, they can make you disappear. It's called forced disappearances. And I guess I have been a victim of that as well. Essentially, you're taken to a black site and they say that you're released. So publicly we're released, but unofficially we're not. So everyone, my friends, my family go into frenzy right now because they don't know where I am. So this is uncertain, right? I could be killed at any point.
For them, yeah, exactly.
So at this point, my friends and family in Toronto, they start a social movement called #FreeThamid, which is something that I'm not supposed to know. But like, you know, whenever, and I was being interrogated all this time. So by the second day, I start getting interrogated. So I was getting interrogated for 15 days straight.
Wow.
So one of them is like, okay, give me your Facebook. So the police officers open my Facebook, and they type your name. So I type my name, and the first one's my profile, and the second one is the page called #FreeThamid. And I'm like,
Holy cow.
that's my profile. That's my profile. So he clicks on it, and then I see like this has now thousands of followers by then, because I can't go from a person who's a normal person
Yeah, it's
who
all of a sudden.
drinks and smokes. I don't want to say this publicly, to someone who's a terrorist the night after. Like that's it's just like by logic, or for people who know me, or people who can even see my Facebook, they don't have to see anything else. Like this shift doesn't happen. So, but I've been out of contact with the rest of the world for 4 days, and I'm also losing hope. So I see that, and I'm like, all right,
There's people rallying.
there's people rallying, and I don't need to know public sentiment, but at least I know. So interrogation for 15 days, then they give us some sham, like, legal case. They pull us to court, then I get taken to jail.
Oh my God.
I served jail for 1.5 months. Then I get released on bail. And the whole public narrative is being fought right now, right? By people who know me, or people who are more
You have your
moderate,
people defending you, and then just the regular.
to people who don't know, who are just gonna say it for what it is, right?
Going off of one picture that they saw,
Yeah,
essentially.
and then like there's evidence in court. Thankfully, there was a video which came out which showed us. One of the things that stood up for me in court is there was like a CCTV footage of me and my two friends were being taken hostage at gunpoint into the restaurant. So that was one of the bigger evidences that like held up in court.
Right.
And I was like, okay,
Thank God there was something.
thank God there's something. And of course, the court is gonna be biased towards the machinery, like the system of government.
Yeah, of
If they've said something, they're of course gonna be biased towards them. But when there's like undisputable evidence at one point, so they just put me to jail without putting me into like anything, without putting into a case that's a terrorism case. So now after jail, I get out on bail, and then I fight a year-long court battle. Like I have to, and court in Bangladesh is like, it's just like stressful.
Yeah.
Like and just remember that I'm still in school. Like I finished my third year of school, and I'm like, I was gonna go for an internship. So I'm in Bangladesh, and I'm fighting this court battle. I'm basically at house arrest, not legally, but like my parents are like, you're not going anywhere.
You can't go
You're not going on dates for sure.
Of course not. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
You're
that's
not going
out
on.
of the question at that point.
No dates, no nothing. Just stay at home, be a good boy. You know. So we finished that. All of the whole thing. My friends are thankfully still, they're in Bangladesh. They were safe. They were released right away. They've been incredible support for me, my family, my friends who were all there, and like countless thousands of people who were supportive and who were like, look at evidence and be a rational person. Like you can make your own story. And another thing is that I wouldn't been coming out and saying this, or people wouldn't have been coming out and saying this if they didn't have, like if they had an vested interest.
Of course, yeah.
I don't mean anything to anyone. I am no one's anything. So people were doing this because they felt like there was an injustice which was being done, whether by, you say, the government or the public, the court of public opinion, whatever it was. But it turned out to be in the best scenario possible. I got out scarred, but at least I got out in one
emotionally
piece.
Scarred, but
physically
all in
fine.
all, everything was ended up to be cleared, and you were fine physically, essentially.
Came back to Toronto after that year. The Canadian government has been incredibly helpful. Like my eternal gratitude to the Canadian government as well.
That's great.
Like even during my court cases, they were, helpful enough to send representatives from the High Commission there.
Insanity.
So I came in, I went back to school, and I was giving my first midterm exam at University of Toronto. And I realized still that maybe that was better than midterm season at University of Toronto.
Wow. That's how rough it was.
It's rough.
Holy shit. That's crazy.
So all the kids who are going to University of Toronto, my salute to you. Like you guys are
they're warriors.
Troopers. Yeah.
Damn, man.
Yeah.
That's
So now we can go on to PTSD now that we've set some context. Yeah.
Obviously, after all that, it's gonna shake you up, right? What has been some of the affects, you know, emotionally, physically, you know, just kind of that trauma that you live with.
Yeah.
What has that experience been after all of that?
Yeah, I think trauma or PTSD is something that I wasn't well aware of before it happened
I don't
to
think
me.
most people are. You're aware of the term maybe, but
Right,
you don't
right,
have
right.
a clue what it is,
Right.
especially at that magnitude, right?
Yeah.
I mean, from what I understand, there's different forms of PTSD
Yes,
too.
absolutely.
Right,
Absolutely.
yours is on the very extreme
Yeah,
side. So
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
for you, I don't think anybody knew what you were really
Yeah.
gonna
And
experience.
even when I think one of the I'll come into the means of which I deal with PTSD,
Mhm.
but I think the first thing that I should touch on is what happens when I have PTSD.
Okay, yeah.
It's an undescribable feeling of I've had depression and anxiety, but imagine depression and anxiety, powder it and put it in a pill and you swallow it and it takes effect in half an hour. So when it happens, it's just like this whole cloud which comes over you and it's physical. There's a huge physical manifestation of that feeling, which often gets triggered by very, at least for me, for people it's different, for the most randomest of things, right? It's not if I like read an article of something like that, or if a terrorist attack happened somewhere else in the world. It's maybe not that. It's a smell, it's a sound, it's reading YouTube comments when people say shit, because those are things that
I wanted to actually ask you about
Yeah,
that because
yeah.
I did see that, and I'm like, what in
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
why?
Yeah,
You
and,
know?
and I'm honestly grateful to you that you're still doing it,
Yeah.
because there's always some people who are gonna talk
Well,
shit.
I mean, look,
There's more people who say positive things, but there's always gonna be
no,
some
there's
people.
always going to be haters. I mean,
Yeah.
shit, you see it to the you know the best people, you
Right,
know.
right.
And mind me, I say the best people. I don't really know them personally, but you know, they give the persona like they're doing everything right and
Yeah.
hold
Yeah.
themselves to a high standard and good values,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Which
Yeah.
you are one of those people.
I
But
try.
or you try. I mean,
Yeah.
that's all you could do.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
all you could do, you know. But it is unfortunate to have the Twitter warriors and all
Right.
these guys, the comments and this and that. Like, it's very easy to get behind, and that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
But it's a downfall of social media, right?
Yeah.
But it goes back to our whole compassion thing
Yeah.
that we were saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
People are not compassionate, man.
People-
They just want to go after people, creating assumptions.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
There's
Prove
a
a
book.
point.
Have you ever read the book the Four Agreements?
No.
So one of the first
Yeah.
things that they say or one of the four
Yeah.
agreements is never make assumptions.
Right.
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 And it's true. Like, I remember reading that and being like, we're very quick to make
Right.
assumptions on ourselves,
Right.
on a moment, on people, whatever that may be. But we're very quick to make assumptions and, like, shit, no context, right? Like, no
Nothing.
facts,
Nothing.
It's gonna only create more harm in that
Yeah.
process. But
Yeah.
going back to your point
Yeah.
of, you know, your experience with the PTSD, right? You're saying that there's certain smells, there's certain like
Yeah,
a comment,
sounds or tastes.
sounds.
Yeah, comments. Yeah.
And has that something that's improved over time, or is it still something to this day, like those things still are triggers to you?
Yeah, I think the frequency of it has gone down over the
Okay.
years, and I've had I've gone to therapy. I've not taken medication for PTSD.
Okay.
I wish there was earlier on, when I was having probably
Like the more severe cases.
the
of
more
it.
severe attacks, I would say,
Mhm.
PTSD attacks that I'd have. But over time, like, I've built like mechanisms for myself, like mental mechanisms through which like I've helped myself.
Yeah.
I think talking to people has helped a lot. And I'll go into like some of the things that I do, but like
Yes.
it's these certain triggers which have gotten better over time. Like now, even if I know that something's a trigger, I will see it and I will feel a certain way, but then I'll tell myself like time out.
At this point, you've built a little bit of a level of awareness
Yeah.
as to what is occurring, and then being able to have kind of a what's the word? Kind of a mechanism
A mechanism, yep.
to work with it, right? Which that's part of the process. I mean, that is part of the healing, I guess you could say,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
One is becoming aware of it. Then two is discovering, okay, I'm aware now, you know,
Yeah.
because at first it just hits you and then it's overwhelming, I'm
Right,
assuming,
right,
right?
right.
And there is no, in that moment, a mechanism.
Yeah,
It is like, holy cow,
Yeah.
right? So, you know, I think that's where therapy comes into play.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
like you mentioned, like the mental component of it and having your mechanisms in a place to do that. But that doesn't just happen. You have to
Yeah.
learn that and identify that. And I'm assuming you learned that through therapy and
also
how did you learn those?
lived experience as well, right?
Okay.
And I think that's something that happened to me very early on is, as I said, like my upbringing made me very practical. I think humility is something that was ingrained in me in a very toxic way, where I'm like, even self-confidence is bad because confidence is arrogance, and my friends hate me for saying this, but I have this issue where I think
it's an interesting point, but keep going because I do have a thought on that.
So when you had extreme humility growing up, it came to a point when everything ended and like you see yourself in national news, international news, like Google me, like this.
God knows
you can't finish like going through the Google pages, right? And you see all of that happening to you, and also like for example, like when I was in jail, they used to treat me as someone, like the biggest G there, because this person killed 22 people, he must be the shit. So
holy shit!
So
because they had a false reputation as to who you were there.
Right.
Oh my God.
Especially the people who were in like terrorism cases, they were like, holy shit.
Yeah, you're the guy.
I am the guy. Right, and there was one day I couldn't like open like a like a can, and someone was like, "Yo, it's you." I was like, "No shit, man."
Yeah, I'm trying to tell you, I can't even open the can.
Yeah, I go to school, bro. Yeah.
Wow.
So when
it's so true. You don't even think about that.
Yeah. So when you go through things like that, like you sort of build like a perspective, like a sort of self-awareness about you, but you also build this external awareness of you where everything that happened to me happened to someone else. When I'm narrating the story, it's not my story.
This is very true.
It's Thamid's story.
That's a great point.
Who's this other person? And like keeping in mind the bad, but also the good or the reputation or whatever, or the fame or the like the infamousness that happened with it, like all of that, the publicity, all of that happened. I don't see it as something that happened to me. So even when PTSD happens, I have a sort of like exclusionary mechanism where I can dissociate. That's the word. I can dissociate myself where I'm like, okay, that was you. This you is very different. You've gone through so much. Even after all of this happened, like I've gone through, like, everyone has life experiences.
Of course, yeah.
I've moved countries. I've gone through family ups and downs. I've gone through relationships, breakups,
right,
disappointments in school, disappointments at work, everyday things, right? And you start dissociating yourself, and it becomes someone else's story, which is not necessarily helpful in a way, but it helps me to the point where I can also dissociate my trauma to that person. And it helps me sort of take that stance where if I can then deal with myself as this other entity, I can also deal with this PTSD or whatever, depression. Depression also happens, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
It's a recipe, or not a recipe, but I mean, it is a recipe, but it's also a result of.
It's a result of that much like mental stress, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah, because when I think of what people, and I used to care a lot about what people think of me. Like as a good kid, I was always aware I wanted people to think the best of me. That's why I chose careers in healthcare, because I wanted to do good for people, right? So I cared about what people thought of me. And when something like that happens, which literally tarnishes everything, and when you're not at fault, I hate, and I know we're gonna come to this, but I hate playing victim. But when you've gone through so much shit, and yet you still have to bear with it because of someone's false narrative of you, you also have to start to dissociate, because if you stay within that, it's not just PTSD that's gonna get
kill you. Yeah, it's gonna kill you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's gonna eat you up inside. It's like with anything, the dwelling, right?
The dwelling.
And it's crazy, right? Because I'm on the other side of it, right?
Yeah.
And I'll never be able to relate to that moment, right?
Yeah.
But I do believe, and this is just my belief, right? Because we all have a trauma that we experience in our life, right? Some people deal with larger traumas than other. And it's funny when you say the whole disassociation thing, right? Like I've had my traumas in my life, and it's the reason why I have this platform today, right? It was built this platform was built from a result of trauma,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it came from a place of like, shit, like this fucked me up pretty good, mentally. But I did a very good job
Yeah.
of identifying that I can use this as power,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I can use this for the better. You don't realize that in the moment,
Right.
but as you're
Right.
going through the healing and you're going through
Yeah.
that process, you're like, holy cow, okay, I'm starting to figure this out a little bit. I'm understanding what works
Yeah.
for me. I'm understanding what doesn't work for me,
Right.
right? And being very self-aware,
Right.
It all comes down to
Absolutely.
that. I mean, that's the first step of the
Yeah.
process.
I
Right?
know my weaknesses, right?
Mhm.
And I have weaknesses. Like, just because you're self-aware doesn't still mean you don't have weaknesses.
course.
You know your weaknesses.
No one's perfect at the
No
end
one's-
of the day.
yeah.
You have to be able to acknowledge that, right? But the crazy part is like the trauma that you face, right? The trauma that I face, the trauma that he's faced, the
Right.
trauma your
Right.
neighbors have faced,
Right.
is all very different. But you don't know how much weight, right? We're seeing it from the outside, right? I always say like, shit, someone had a bad day and their bad day was that they got a flat tire, right?
Right.
And that's the most trauma they've maybe even faced in their life.
Right.
Right?
Absolutely.
But for them, it feels like so heavy and it feels like this. But whatever you believe in, the universe, God, whatever it may be, will never give you cards that you're not able to play.
Right.
Or it's not going to give you anything that you can't handle. In the moment, it doesn't feel that way.
I agree with you, and I also disagree with
Okay.
you. Right. And I have opinions on this.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Please.
Because I do agree that that trauma, to each person their own.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely think that someone's flat tire or someone being mugged, to them it feels the same as that happening to me. So I completely agree with you on that. But what you mentioned about you, whether it be universe or God,
Right.
I don't think it's innately fair, because for the people you hear from, those are the people that have had the cards they could deal with and who had the mechanisms or the strength, and you and me who are able to use it and turn it into something good.
Right.
But there's also a huge majority of people
Who are not able to do
who
that.
are not able to do that. And we started our conversation with talking about addiction and talking about homelessness and talking about
Very true.
empathy, right?
That's a good
And
point.
it must have been something like that or something very different that they couldn't deal with, and that is why they are where they are.
Very true.
So I do not think, and it sounds negative, right? And it sounds not pessimistic, but I do not think that everyone is given the cards that they are able to deal with, and which is why people like you and me who are able to use our trauma or use it as a strength need to help those people.
Yes, I agree. No, 1000%. I think people that are able to come on the other side of their
Right.
trauma
Right.
found the power within
Right,
themselves.
absolutely.
Where then,
The
like
power
you
to
said,
them.
can then go help those people. Because like you said, maybe they didn't have the strength
They
to
didn't.
be able to do it, or they didn't have the support system
Right.
around that. So I agree. That
Yeah.
is a very, very valid
Yeah.
point. And I'm speaking from a point where I was able to
Right,
get out of
exactly.
it, like you were able to
Yeah,
get out of it.
yeah.
So it is true. And I think that's where, the God and the universe has given us this
Right. Opportunity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, to be able to do that. And you're not going to be able to help everyone.
No,
But
no, you won't be.
something that's very common that you hear from a lot of other people that have gotten out of traumatic situations is that if you're able to help one person, you've already kind of
Right.
served your
Right.
served
Religious
that
scriptures
purpose.
say the same thing, which is
Mhm.
if you save one person, it's like saving humanity, and if you kill one person, it's like killing all of humanity.
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true. It is a crazy phenomenon when you really think about it, and you
Yeah.
get into the perspective of like how powerful the mind is, good or bad, right?
Absolutely.
And it is unfortunate that some people are on the other side of it.
Yeah.
But if we have the opportunity to
Right.
help, I think that's what we do as a society. We're
Yeah.
here to help. We're here to be kind. We're here
Yeah.
to be compassionate.
Yeah.
And through trauma, through poor experiences,
Yeah.
through the moments of life that we face, you build a little bit of that compassion.
Yeah.
Because shit, if you never went through that, God knows what your perspective on
Right.
life would be today,
Right.
right? Same thing with with me and my experiences.
Yeah.
I have a different level of compassion for people that may
Right.
have gone through something similar,
Right.
and it's what we were dealt, and now what we
Yeah.
choose to do with it.
Yeah.
What-
Absolutely.
So you spoke about the mechanisms that you've kind of used to overcome.
Yeah.
What are some of those mechanisms
Yeah.
that you've done? You mentioned therapy as one
Yep.
of them.
Therapy, definitely. And as I said, like
And
dissociation.
therapy is, I know there's different forms of therapy.
Right.
The therapy that you speak of is
It's
more
like very standard westernized
Okay.
therapy where
speaking
you're
to
speaking to
a
a
licensed
counselor,
therapist.
speaking to a licensed counselor or
Mhm.
therapist. And I think that definitely works because for a lot of people, they can't open up to they can't open up to people they know because of a certain level of baggage that they have.
Mm-hmm.
It is always easier to open up to someone who you're unfamiliar with.
Yeah, this
Right?
is true. Yeah.
When you walk down the streets of New York, people will open up to you and they will tell you about their whole life. Right?
That's crazy.
It's a very
funny.
distinct characteristic of New York. Like people, although they're hella rude, they will always open up to you. However, I think what has helped me is opening up to people who are near and dear to me, because I'm generally someone who doesn't share a lot, and I have a really hard time sharing.
I'm the same way.
Yeah. But I try my best every day, and especially if I'm going through something, I
Mhm.
will tell my friends, I will tell my family. And I guess not everyone has a supportive social system or social support, but I am lucky to have one, right? And the people around me have always been extremely sympathetic or empathetic towards me. They've been kind to me, and I've been giving them the kindness back. I've been trying to, at least, maybe not to the extent that they've given to me. But I try to unload to them because I've seen that with people I trust, I have a better time saying it, because for a lot of people, they just sometimes want to say, but I like hearing the suggestions, whether I take it or not. But when someone gives me suggestions, I feel like they care about me, and that's why they're giving me suggestions of doing something.
Mm-hmm.
And that support system, or that network of support, has been incredible for me managing my PTSD, managing my depression. And you go to a therapist and you have to tell them what you're feeling. When you have built a support system like that, they can hear you and they can be like,
They
you're
know.
going through shit.
Yeah.
You're going through shit. Let's talk.
Yeah.
And even if you don't talk, you feel a little better after.
100%.
Again, this isn't FDA approved. I can't
No, of course.
prescribe it to someone.
This is just a personal experience.
It's a personal
Mhm.
experience, but if you have the opportunity to, do try opening up to people, because honestly, it helps a lot.
I agree.
If you have good support system who has been kind to you and empathetic to you, try it, because it also builds better relationships.
Vulnerability is big. It's crazy.
Yeah. Like we're being vulnerable right now.
100%.
Right?
I mean, and even a little bit deeper than that, males have a harder time being vulnerable, and which is why you hear so much about the stigma around mental health
Right.
and men,
Right.
right?
Suicide rates are higher among men.
Exactly. It's a proven statistic at this point, and I do think it's because men have this kind of
Shell.
we just carry ourselves in a way
Yeah.
where we don't need to talk. We could figure it out. Be
Yeah,
a man,
yeah,
kind of thing,
yeah.
right? And it's not true. I mean, we're human beings. Like, you got something on your mind, say it. Yeah. To me, something that helped me a lot
Yeah.
was journaling. It was
Right. Incredible.
it was a form of release. And even more for someone like myself, at least, where I didn't like to talk to people about
Yeah.
my problems. Like, I did do the whole my problems are my problems, like I got to figure it out kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And there was a form of release that came with it.
Right.
I could be there and I could just let it out. And
Right,
and
that-
very similar to therapy, when you're speaking, you start writing and not a lot is coming out. But the
Yeah.
more you start writing, holy shit, a
You
lot
get
of
into
shit
the
starts
flow.
coming out.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my God, you didn't even know this was
Yeah.
going on in your
Yeah.
mind, So we do need to be more vulnerable as men.
Mhm.
We need to understand that it is acceptable to talk to people, talk
Right,
to your friends, and even speak to your friends and say, hey, I could tell something's a little
Right,
off.
right, right.
Something's off. Like, you could
Do-
talk to me.
Yeah, right.
Like be
and do it for
open.
someone else as well, not just for
Mhm,
yourself. Like if
exactly.
you hear something from someone, and I think with men, especially like heterosexual men, like like we go through this shit where we're like, okay, if I'm vulnerable, I'm not a man.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I don't want to say this,
I
but
mean,
as
it's
someone
far
who's
from the truth. Yeah.
yeah, someone who's been through jail and survived a terrorist attack, I
Mhm.
can tell you it's still manly to share. It's still
Absolutely.
manly to be vulnerable. Like
Absolutely.
if at this point someone says you're a pussy, stop.
Yeah.
Stop. I've seen more than you.
Exactly.
Yeah, so
I
I-
think it comes from a place of just not knowing,
Yeah,
lack
yeah.
of awareness,
Yeah.
lack of self-awareness on their
Yeah,
end.
absolutely. And you can be ignorant,
Mhm.
but I think it will only help you if you can start opening up, and it can be to another man, it can be to your spouse, your girlfriend, your partner, whatever it may be. It can be to your barber,
Yeah.
because there was a study which from
Yeah, I did see that
you
actually.
see, yeah,
I did
yeah,
see
you
that
saw that,
actually.
right? From New York
Something,
City, actually.
What? Yeah, I don't. Was it you? Did you? You
Yeah,
didn't.
I was telling you
Did
about
you
this.
tell me
Yeah,
about it?
when we were
Okay, I was
on
like,
the
someone
phone.
told
Yeah.
me about that recently.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is
So,
crazy.
which is from New York City, actually, where like men measuring men's mental health, they saw that men open up much more to their barbers
That's funny.
than to their own family members.
That's funny.
Yeah.
That's great. I guess it's a safe environment.
It is a safe environment for
people to
us, bro.
speak.
We're there so much.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We
Yeah.
do spend a lot of time there.
Yeah.
So, obviously,
Yeah.
you've been dealing with your PTSD after your traumatic experience, and it's been a journey for you, to say the least.
Right.
What's life for TK like today?
Yeah. I think it's interesting because I've also become much more of a workaholic, which is not something that I recommend to anyone. It's just a character trait. My dad's a workaholic
Yeah.
as well, so I guess I get a little bit of that. But I keep myself busy. My day job, as I say, is I work for a healthcare communication firm in New York.
Mhm.
We work primarily with pharmaceutical companies and nonprofits.
Okay.
So we do strategic communications with them. I work on the PR side as well as the medical side. So I deal with like a lot of big media, like anyone you can think of, like ABC, NBC, New York Times, Wall Street Journal. So that's a very fun way of expressing myself because I'm constantly selling stories to them. But it's also great, it feels great because I studied epidemiology, so I have a good understanding of the products or the diseases that I work with. I can be vocal, as you know, I love sharing. So I can share about a lot of these stories. And, you know, when these stories get into those outlets and it creates impact, and we can see like the UVMs, or unique monthly viewers, when we see that, it's incredible because you're talking about people with life-changing stories of how they overcame a disease or how a product or a drug has saved them. And yes, our American healthcare system and the whole pharmaceutical industry is, and I will say, fucked up.
Yeah.
And from the inside, I can tell you that for sure.
Yeah.
But there's good people working. There's good people that I meet every day who want to make a positive change in the lives of people. There's good legislators and governors who are always working to make sure that people get affordable healthcare. And I think that's what satisfies me, even though it's a very corporate job. In terms of what I do, after I finished my master's at Columbia, my specialization was treatment of addiction, and I specifically work with opioid use disorder, which is a huge public health crisis in America.
Absolutely. Yep.
I'm passionate about addiction. I've had addiction issues myself. I've learned to speak about it more openly than I used to be able to before. And which makes me very passionate about like treatments for addiction, as well as new treatments that are coming up, like anything from like ketamine helping people with depression, or MDMA helping people with PTSD. So that to me is fascinating, how the connection between things that we call street drugs can help with it can help with mental health diseases. So
Right.
I love doing that. I have clients who are working on that.
Okay.
So that really keeps me busy, and I advocate, as you know, like we've been talking about mental health for
Yeah.
so long. I advocate for positive mental health, people seeking treatment, counseling, and any sort of, you know, therapy or mechanism that helps you, right? Because
Absolutely.
I always believe in like every single individual is different. And so the remedy for whatever they're going through, even if it's not a remedy or how they deal with it, is going to be unique. So while treatment has tons of data that it works, I believe that it should be combined with therapy, and I believe that a lot of it's unique for everyone. So that's a little bit of my day job. I wanted to take this opportunity, since you've given me this opportunity, to talk
Yes,
about
of
my
course. Yes, please.
other ventures that I've gone into, and I think a lot of it is influenced by what I've been through, because I co-founded a nonprofit with some of my friends from Toronto.
Oh, nice.
It's called Bachar Lorai, which in Bangladesh we speak Bangla. It's one of the most the biggest spoken languages in the world as well, because there's so many Bangladeshis out there. But in Bangla means strive to survive, and we are an organization who tries to empower Bangladeshis worldwide. And because there's so many diaspora communities of Bengalis or Bangladeshis, whether you talk about America in different cities or Canada or London. We used to be colonized, so we're there in all the pre-colonial British countries. So there's like in Australia or in the UK or now in the Middle East, in South Africa, in Malaysia, Indonesia. And a lot of them are like low income communities.
Right.
So we try to help them. Our work happens through community building, policy research, and signature initiatives, which is like aid work on the ground. So we have now some healthy affiliations with the United Nations. Me being in New York really helps that.
Wow.
The United Nations General Assembly is coming up in like the end of this month, and we'll be there as well. So it's an incredible opportunity, and one of the reasons that I love working for that is because for a small organization, we were registered in 2023, and the response has been phenomenal from the community, not just from the Bangladeshi community, but from other communities as well because of the work that's being done. Is that we're tying in not just that when we're bringing people into our community building efforts, we're hearing from them what are the issues that we should be working on. Then we are doing work on the ground, whether it be in Bangladesh or in the places that we work in North America. When we do those aid efforts and we take feedback from community and can report that in a policy format, which we can take to policymakers or the government, it ties in. It's like this very nice ecosystem or synchronicity of work,
Right.
which is hard for small organizations to do. And I think we have an incredible team. Our co-founders are amazing, incredible individuals. Shout out to them. Like, I think I'm grateful for them. They drive me every day, like even when I'm like lazy after work and I want to chill, like they keep me going.
That's awesome.
And I think that whole sync that happens between the three areas of work is what's adding value for the organization. And now we're being accepted into bigger and bigger platforms. Hopefully we've started working with other diaspora communities, and hopefully we'll reach more mainstream as time goes on. So a motivation for that is definitely, as we were talking about before, is that need for empathy. The nonprofit work cannot happen if you don't have empathy.
Absolutely.
Right? So there's a lot of empathy that happens every day in the work that we do. And I think we'll continue that as long as I have empathy in my veins, which I hope will never run out.
Right.
And as long as I have energy and I can operate on a few hours of sleep each night.
It is. It's a lot to juggle a full-time job, have that kind of like passion project on the side, right? It's a big battle, but I use a saying, right? And I butchered a little bit. It's something that I discovered in my path of like journaling and going through this, right? Where it's like purpose leads to passion, passion leads to progress, progress leads to results.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It's, dude, and it was just something that I just journaling. I'm like,
are you a poet, Andre?
I'm not, but I feel like I've looked.
Yeah.
It's funny, when I was in high school and middle school, oh, you can't write, you're not this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I think I can.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And that was just through my self-discovery. And I do believe that, right? Because when you're so damn passionate about something, you know, and you attach that to a purpose-driven life, that time when you're not tired, you are gonna maybe do that little bit of extra work, you know, and you're gonna do it because you know it's something bigger than yourself, right? It's bigger than you, it's bigger than that moment, it's bigger than the little feeling of tiredness that you might be feeling. It's all valid, but reality is, you know, there's an extra little oomph inside of you to go do something big. So I think you found that. You know, you found something that you're really passionate outside of your work, right? Which you're also passionate as well for those reasons. But this gives a little bit of like a deeper meaning to it all.
Yeah, and if I had the opportunity to leave my 9 to 5, I would. Like, of course, it's a new nonprofit. We're operating more of a startup model.
Exactly.
It's difficult, but I think the biggest satisfaction comes is like when you're doing on the ground projects and you hear, so we work with a lot of like local partners, whether it be New York, Toronto, or Dhaka, or like in the remote regions of Bangladesh. You hear from them and someone calls you in the middle of the night because of course the time difference, and they're like, we just distributed, you know, this many aid packages in this flood prone area and people were underwater. You know, it's ridiculous stories that you hear every day. And then they say they were so happy, they don't know you, but they just, you know, they were praying for you. And, you know, like you're down, you're tired, but then you just get such a boost of the energy from, you know, just helping people who you don't know, who you'll probably never even see. Sometimes we can't even get photos from these places because they're so remote.
True.
But just knowing the fact that that my extra effort or my sacrifice of a little bit of sleep or energy or going out with friends even is making a real impact, and that's what we want to do. Like it's the social
Absolutely.
impact that we're being able to make. It's just an incredible motivation. And when you're dealing with mental health issues, just tying this back, it is important to get that validation. And don't say validation in a negative sense. I say validation in a very positive sense, that if you're making a meaningful change in someone's life, that's the biggest validation you can ever get for your
So
life.
true. Yeah.
Right? The organization's name is, again, Bachelor BL. I have a cap. It's
Nice.
all branded right now. But yeah, so follow it. Our Instagram account is at BACHARLORAI. We're doing good work. We just launched a fellowship program for youth around the world so that they can learn how we've done nonprofit work in a very global, mobile way,
Very cool.
in a very dissociated way, using the internet as an important tool,
That's awesome.
as digital tools. And I think if we can, pass on the knowledge that we have to someone, or build someone, or help even just get a certificate to someone so that they can get a better job. Again, I'm not going to get anything out of it. It's not like the United States federal government is going to give me $100,000 check for that.
Right.
I hope that happens, but I'm not going to get that.
Right,
But even if you can do that for someone else, I think that makes a lot of difference in your life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It really is about giving to the next generation, and going back to what we were saying before, having that opportunity to give to people that are in need, because we all know there's plenty of need in the world, and it's essential.
Yeah.
Outside of that, you said you had another venture.
Yeah. One last thing. Yeah. Before that, I'll relieve everyone
No, you're good.
of our conversation. But this is the last thing, and which is the last bit of sleep I had left or free time I have left. I decided to use it for something else. I've been passionate about music all my life. I make music myself.
Oh, shit.
I make electronic music.
Nice.
I'm less of a musician, more of someone who's passionate about it.
Yeah.
I have Spotify and everything. I've been playing instruments since I was in grade 6. But anyway, I've been music for a long time in my life. But this new opportunity came up last year with this new collective. It's called Bangla New Era.
Okay.
Again, Bangla is the language that we speak. But there's a huge younger population who listen to Bangla music, but the music that they have exposure to is not necessarily the sounds that they can relate to.
Okay.
So again, as I was a music producer, but then I realized that I'm a communicator in my professional life, and I'm a professional at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And I was like, why don't I use my talents to push a platform that can get already established artists to the next level? Because again, I work with PR and media,
True.
and secondly, give a chance to a lot of talented artists who are upcoming.
Yeah.
So Bangla New Era is like an integrated platform that gives resources from everything from recording, distribution, music videos, support, advisory council, anything for young artists or upcoming artists in one holistic area. And also we have Bangla New Era Live, which is we do shows. I just had a show this weekend. Incredible turnout in New York City. I wish you were here. I would have brought you to the concert.
Yeah.
So we just had a show. There was about 700 people. It was at a big venue in New York. We want to expand, absolutely, but we've had really big artists who from Bangladesh are now exploring new sounds so that they can cater to a younger population. We're launching 2 of the artists who are working with us, Musa and Sanjoy. They're huge upcoming artists. And they're both both of them are US based. They weren't born in Bangladesh. They don't have any attachments to Bangladesh, but they're, of course, the one thing that unites them is the language Bangla. So they have Bangla / English songs,
Right.
but the sound is very American. So they're now introducing an electronic sound with Bangla, which has not been done before.
Very cool.
And that album's, the first song's dropping on the 6th, Karun. And the album is dropping the end of this month. I've become heavily involved with them because, of course, these are amazing people. They're incredible artists and talents, and I want to help them with the skills that I have. Again, I don't think I'll be making a lot of money out of this.
Yeah, I mean, you really never know where these things will take you. That's the crazy part about it. It's something that you enjoy, and you obviously want to be a part of it, but you really don't know where it'll take you. That's the cool thing about it.
And exactly, and I think again, just going back to what New York does, I don't think I would have had this opportunity if I didn't move to New York.
True that.
But like doors like that have opened up for me, and I don't want to do it alone. I want to take people with me.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to promote the shit out of this podcast because I know you're doing something good. Like I've talked
you.
to you, and I know that you're turning your trauma into something that's positive, not just for yourself, but for the so many people who listen to you, like your whole audience. Right? Again, we've talked about men and their vulnerabilities. There's not a lot of people who are talking about that, right? You have the Alpha Bro podcast, right? But they're not talking about men's vulnerabilities necessarily, right?
No.
So you're doing something good, and I hope all of us can do something good as we take this to the next level, right? Because we're all young, we're all upcoming, we're hungry to do good, but we're also hungry to do good while making good impact. So I think it's important for us to stay focused on our mission. I want to stay focused on my ventures that I'm trying to do, whether it makes me money or not. But along with that, take good people with me on the journey.
Absolutely. I love that.
Yeah.
So before we kind of wrap it up, I want to do like a quick little rapid fire question.
Hell
with you.
yeah, let's do it.
And then you can give a closing statement. But first question I got to ask you, your favorite restaurant in New York City?
Oh. See, I'm sorry.
I'm sure that's impossible, but if you could, even if it's like 2 or 3.
Okay, if someone was going to come, try 7th Street Burger, Tompkins Square Bagels. I'm just saying quintessentially New York things. I forgot the name of the pizza place. I'll tell you when I remember. But also Coca Doc. So
Okay.
I said something of every tier. Coca Doc, incredible fried chicken,
New York
caviar.
Food scene is awesome.
Yeah.
Second question I'm gonna ask you is, what does it mean to stay tranquilo?
I wish this wasn't a rapid fire question, but I think
you're gonna answer it in a long form. It's okay.
Okay. I think to stay tranquilo, and I've been taking Duolingo, so now I know much more Spanish.
I like it. That bird gets angry if you don't hit it.
My bird's been crying. I think to stay tranquilo means to be empathetic again, because if you're not empathetic about yourself and the people around you, whether it be like friends, family, co-workers, just someone random in the streets, if you're not empathetic towards their situation, you can't really stay tranquilo. Tranquilo is a state of mind, and I think that state of mind doesn't require you to smoke some good ganja, but it also requires you to have that mentality, which I guess Bob Marley also promoted.
Bob Marley's a big inspiration behind this.
Oh, hell yeah!
Yeah. I mean, it was originated from a little bit of ganja and a little bit of Marley.
Hell yeah!
I'll say that. Like it was a lot of inspiration at that time when I was going through what I was going through. I was like listening to a lot of Marley and reading, meditation. I mean, there was a whole. But Marley was also a big influence in this kind of just mindset and perspective and all that. So it's funny when people always bring up the Marley thing. I'm like, you get it. You get it.
That is what it means to stay tranquilo. And it's a state of mind. Like whether you smoke the ganja or not, right? Like it's a state of mind where you're more accepting to things and you don't try not to dwell in things that are negative, right? Because life has enough negatives already. Like why would you?
Exactly. Yeah. And if you could leave a sentence or a word, whatever that is, for the people, what could you leave?
I think it's not cliche, but I started this podcast saying that humility was something that was ingrained in me to a level that's toxic humility. But I think one thing that my dad always told me is be happy with what you have and always aim to be the best at what you do.
I love that. You hit something there. It's like, be happy with what you have. And going to the Bob Marley thing, you've probably seen the video where it's like, are you rich? And he goes, how do you define rich?
Right.
He's like, do you have a lot of wealth? Do you have money? And he's like, that's rich? And he's like, no, I don't. If that's rich, then I'm not rich.
Right.
But I am rich in life. I'm rich in happiness. I'm rich in joy.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's really what people lose sight of sometimes. It's like, you could be pretty damn happy without a lot.
Yeah.
And if you just got the people around you that you love and you're doing things that make you happy, and
right.
surround yourself with the right people, like you're gonna
Yeah.
find a lot of joy in your life.
Yeah, you can be ambitious and you can still be humble.
100%.
You can there's a balance that you can hit, and
Yeah.
staying tranquilo comes within that.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. Well, dude, it's been a freaking blast. I appreciate it, bro. I'm
Thank
glad
you so much again.
First pod in New York was
Yeah.
awesome, to say the least. So thank you again for the hospitality and being able to put this together. I'm glad
Yeah.
we got to do it. So thank you very much. And
Fantastic.
where can people find you before
Yeah.
we wrap it up?
Absolutely.
Let them know. And of course, we'll tag everything as well. But
Absolutely. I think for the people, I just want to leave one last word, which is it's just incredible, being able to host Andre in the first New York podcast episode. I'm just incredibly honored because I think this podcast touches on something that is near and dear to me, which is staying empathetic, staying calm, staying quiet, and understanding and believing in people. If you want to do something good, there's always a way. You just have to find your way. Be ambitious, but also be humble. And I think try to do good all the time, because that's going to take you down roads that you didn't know existed.
yeah,
Stay in touch, everyone. I'm always free and open. Reach out to me. I'll respond. You can find me on LinkedIn, Thamid Khan, Thahmid Khan. Find me on Instagram. It is at THKRETURNS. So THK Returns. That's my Instagram. Hit me up. Let me know. Follow me. I'll follow you back. Always down to connect. Always happy to stay tranquilo.
yes, sir. I love it. Well, thank you guys for tuning in for this. I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. Definitely reach out. And if you have any questions or thoughts from this podcast and this conversation, definitely let us know. Thank you again. And I'm excited for we'll probably do something like this again, I'm sure. So
Hell yeah.
I'm excited. So thank you, man.
Thank you
Appreciate
so
it.
much, Andre.